You don't survive in this world by caring. You survive by turning a blind eye. Sadie knew the rules. Scrub the floors, ignore the bloodstains on the Persian rugs, and never ever look the boss in the eye. But tonight, the rules shattered. One phone call, one desperate stifled sob echoing in a quiet hallway. That was all it took for a ruthless man to stop dead in his tracks. He wasn't supposed to hear her. He definitely wasn't supposed to care. Industrial bleach ruins the skin. It eats away the top layer of the epidermis, leaving your knuckles cracked red and prone to bleeding if you make a tight fist. Sadie stared at her hands under the harsh, fluorescent light of the staff bathroom. They looked 10 years older than the rest of her 24-year-old body. She dried them on a cheap paper towel, wincing as the rough paper dragged across a split cuticle. It didn't matter. The money mattered. The Costello estate paid triple the going rate for domestic staff. They didn't pay for exceptional dusting or a streak-free shine on the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grey Atlantic. They paid for ghosts. You were expected to move through the sprawling, cold stone mansion without making a sound. You didn't ask why the heavy mahogany door in the east wing had a new bullet hole in it. You didn't comment on the men in cheap leather jackets who tracked mud and worse into the foyer at 3 in the morning. You cleaned. You kept your head down. You survived. Sadie was a very good ghost. For 8 months, she had existed in the periphery of Victor Costello's vision, just another blur in a grey uniform, pushing a cart of cleaning supplies. Victor was not the kind of man you wanted to be noticed by. He wasn't some polished, charming aristocrat playing at organized crime. He was a second-generation bruiser who had inherited a crumbling empire and held it together with nothing but brute force and sheer paranoia. When he walked into a room, the temperature seemed to drop. He had dark, exhausted eyes, a jawline perpetually covered in a rough shadow of stubble, and a habit of staring at people as if he was calculating how much it would cost to bury them. Sadie avoided him like the plague. She memorized his schedule. If he was in the dining room, she was in the West Wing. If he was in his study, she was cleaning the guest suites. She didn't have the luxury of getting fired, or worse, getting on his bad side. Every cent of her inflated paycheck was spoken for before it even hit her account. Her younger brother Sam was dying. It was a slow, agonizing decline, leukemia resistant to the standard rounds of chemotherapy. The experimental treatments were not covered by whatever pathetic excuse for insurance Sadie had. Desperation makes people stupid. 6 months ago, sitting in a sterile hospital waiting room, watching her brother cough up blood, Sadie had made a phone call to a man she shouldn't have, Mick O'Shea. He ran a predatory loan operation out of a strip club on the south side. He didn't ask for collateral. He didn't run a credit check. He just handed her a duffel bag with $60,000 in cash and told her the interest rate. It was a deal with the devil, but it kept Sam breathing. But the devil always comes to collect. The interest had compounded. The payments had become impossible. For the last 3 weeks, Sadie had been starving herself, walking miles to work, to save bus fare, scraping together every loose dollar to meet O'Shea's weekly quota. She picked up her plastic bucket, the heavy smell of lemon and ammonia stinging her nose. It was 1:45 a.m. The house was mostly silent, save for the rhythmic drumming of a heavy rainstorm lashing against the reinforced glass windows. Most of the staff had gone home or retreated to their quarters. Sadie had volunteered for the late shift. It paid an extra $50. $50 was a drop in the ocean of her debt, but it was something. She wheeled her cart down the second-floor corridor, the thick carpet absorbing the sound of her cheap, rubber-soled shoes. At the end of the hall was Victor's office. A sliver of warm yellow light spilled from beneath the heavy oak door. He was still awake. Sadie stopped. Her chest tightened. The rule was simple: do not disturb the boss when the door is closed. but the brass wall sconces outside his office were thick with dust, a job she was supposed to finish tonight. She hesitated, her cracked hands gripping the handle of the cart. She could skip it. No one would notice. But fear of losing this job, the only lifeline Sam had left, forced her forward. She parked the cart a safe distance away, taking a microfiber cloth and a bottle of polish. She moved silently, stepping into the pool of light outside the office door. She reached up, wiping down the ornate brass fixtures. Inside the office, she could hear the low, rhythmic clinking of ice against crystal. Victor was drinking. Heavy footsteps paced back and forth, muffled by the thick rugs. He was on the phone, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. She couldn't make out the words, just the aggressive cadence of them. Sadie worked faster, desperate to finish and retreat to the safety of the staff quarters. Then her own pocket vibrated. It was a harsh, jarring buzz against her hip. She froze. Her burner phone, the one she only used for the hospital. And O'Shea. She pulled it out, her heart hammering against her ribs. The cracked screen illuminated the dark hallway. Unknown caller. Her stomach bottomed out. It was 2 a.m. The hospital didn't call at 2 a.m. unless someone was dead. O'Shea didn't call unless he was angry. She should have turned it off. She should have walked away. But panic overrode logic. With a trembling thumb, she hit accept and pressed the cheap plastic to her ear. "Hello," Sadie whispered, her voice barely a thread of sound. "Sadie, darling." The thick, mocking Irish lilt of Mick O'Shea poured through the receiver like toxic sludge. Sadie closed her eyes, leaning back against the cold, silk-lined wallpaper of the corridor. "Mick, I have the payment. I get paid on Friday. I swear I'll have it." She kept her voice down, a desperate, frantic whisper. "Friday is a long time from now, Sadie," Mick said. He didn't sound angry. He sounded amused. That was infinitely worse. "And honestly, the interest has been stacking up. You're short. Again." "I'm not short, I did the math." "Math is subjective, sweetheart. My accountant says you owe a balloon payment of 20 grand. Tonight." Sadie's lungs forgot how to work. 20 grand. She didn't have $20 in her checking account. That wasn't the deal. She choked out, her throat restricting. "Mick, please. I've given you everything. I just need a little more time." "Time's up." There was a pause, the sound of a lighter flicking on the other end. "I'm looking at something real sad right now, Sadie. Real tragic." "What are you talking about?" "I'm standing in the parking lot of St. Jude's." The blood drained from Sadie's face. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her. "No," she breathed. "No, Mick, you stay away from him. Security here is a joke," Mick continued casually. "My boy Declan walked right up to the 3rd floor, oncology wing. He says your brother looks terrible. All those tubes. Be a real shame if someone tripped over a wire. Power goes out. Alarms don't work. Kid just goes to sleep." "Stop," Sadie gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth, physically holding in the scream that wanted to tear out of her throat. Tears pricked her eyes, hot and fast, spilling over her lashes before she could blink them away. "You have 1 hour, Sadie. Wire the 20 grand, or Declan pulls the plug on the kid. Literally." "I don't have it." "Mick, please, I'll do anything. I'll work for you. I don't want you. I want my money. 1 hour. Clock's ticking." The line went dead. The silence in the hallway was deafening. Sadie stared at the dark screen of the phone. The air was too thin. She couldn't draw it into her lungs. Her brother. Sam. Small, pale, putting up a brave front while poison pumped through his veins. He was up there asleep, completely unaware that a monster was standing outside his door. Her legs gave out. Sadie slid down the wall, her knees hitting the expensive carpet. She clamped both hands over her mouth, but it wasn't enough. A sob tore its way up her throat, violent and ragged. It punched through her tightly pressed fingers, a raw, ugly sound of total, absolute defeat. She curled into a ball on the floor, the cleaning cloth discarded beside her. The tears came in a flood, now choking her. She was hyperventilating her narrow shoulders, shaking as she fought to keep the noise down. She had failed him. Sam was going to die because she was too stupid, too poor, too weak to stop it. She cried like an animal caught in a trap, gut-wrenching, breathless, and entirely broken. A few feet away inside the office, Victor Costello sat behind a heavy mahogany desk, rubbing the bridge of his nose. He was operating on 3 hours of sleep and far too much caffeine. The Russian syndicate downtown was encroaching on his supply lines. 2 of his lieutenants were pointing fingers at each other, and Victor was fairly certain he was going to have to shoot one of them by the end of the week. He poured another 2 fingers of scotch, the amber liquid burning his throat. He hated this life. He had always hated it, but it was his cross to bear. You don't walk away from the Costello family. You leave in a box. He set the glass down, resting his elbows on the desk. He closed his eyes, welcoming the quiet. The house was finally still. Then he heard it. It was faint at first. A muffled gasp. A wet, hitching breath. Victor's eyes snapped open. The exhaustion vanished, replaced instantly by the cold, calculating alertness that had kept him alive this long. He didn't move. He listened. It was coming from the hallway, right outside his door. Victor's hand slid smoothly into the open drawer of his desk, his fingers wrapping around the cold grip of a suppressed 9mm. Intruders didn't usually cry, but in his world, a distraction was a distraction. He stood up, his tall frame moving with a terrifying lack of sound. He bypassed the center of the room, keeping to the shadows along the wall. He reached the oak door. The crying was clearer now. It wasn't a trap. It wasn't an act. It was the sound of someone whose world was actively ending. The sheer agony in that muffled sobbing made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. Victor reached out, turning the brass handle slowly, making sure the latch didn't click. He pulled the door open just a few inches. The light from the hallway spilled over his boots. He looked down. There, crumpled against the wall like a discarded rag doll, was one of the maids. He vaguely recognized her. Small, quiet, always looking at the floor. She was wearing the standard grey uniform, her dark hair slipping out of a messy bun. She had her hands clamped over her mouth, tears streaming down her pale face, rocking back and forth. A cheap plastic bucket and a bottle of polish sat abandoned a few feet away. Victor frowned. The grip on his gun loosened, but he didn't lower it. He didn't do tears. He didn't do comfort. If a staff member was having a breakdown, they were supposed to do it on their own time, in their own quarters. He opened his mouth to tell her exactly that, to tell her to get up, get out, and not come back. But before he could speak, the burner phone on the floor next to her buzzed again. Sadie flinched violently, as if the device had struck her. She scrambled for it with shaking, desperate hands, dropping it once before hitting the speaker button. Mick, she choked out, her voice a wet, pathetic rasp. Victor froze. Mick O'Shea. What the hell was one of his maids doing, talking to a bottom-feeding street rat like O'Shea? Just checking in, darling. O'Shea's slimy voice echoed from the phone's tiny speaker. Declan just sent me a picture. Your brother looks so peaceful. Be a shame to wake him up. You got my money yet? I'm trying, Sadie sobbed, bending over the phone as if she could protect it. I called my bank. I tried to get a cash advance. They declined it. Mick, I need until morning. Just let me call someone. Bank's closed, Sadie. Your credit is garbage. You have 45 minutes. And honestly, don't bother calling the cops. By the time they get here, Declan will have injected a lovely little air bubble into your brother's IV. An embolism. Very tragic. Hard to prove. Sadie let out a horrific sound, a wail of pure, unadulterated grief that she immediately tried to swallow down. Victor stood in the doorway perfectly still. The pieces fell into place. A loan shark, a sick kid, extortion. O'Shea was operating in Costello territory, extorting a civilian, extorting his employee, inside his house. A dangerous, quiet fury ignited in Victor's chest. It wasn't righteous justice. Victor wasn't a hero. He was a monster. But he was a monster with strict rules about territory and respect. O'Shea was a roach, and this roach was dirtying his house, threatening a girl who scrubbed Victor's floors for minimum wage. Victor pushed the heavy oak door wide open. The hinges didn't creak, but the shift in the air was palpable. Sadie didn't notice him at first. She was too lost in the drowning wave of her own panic. She was begging now, rapid-fire pleas falling from her lips into the cold speaker of the phone. "I'll sign whatever you want. I'll work it off. I'll do anything, Mick, please. Don't hurt him. He's just a kid. He doesn't know anything about the money." A large, heavy shadow fell over her. Sadie gasped, her head snapping up. Victor Costello stood towering over her. He had shed his suit jacket hours ago. His white dress shirt was unbuttoned at the collar, his tie hanging loose. He held a gun down by his thigh, casually, like an extension of his arm. But it was his face that made Sadie's blood run cold. It was carved out of granite. His dark eyes were fixed on the phone on the floor, burning with a quiet, terrifying violence. Sadie scrambled backward, her rubber shoes squeaking against the carpet. She hit the wall, her breath catching in her throat. She had broken the rule. She had disturbed him. She was going to be fired. She was going to be killed. "Mr. Costello!" she stammered frantically, wiping at her wet face with her ruined hands. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I was just cleaning. I'll go." Victor didn't look at her. He stepped forward, his polished leather shoe stopping inches from the phone. "Sadie." "Who's that?" Mick's voice squawked from the device. "You better not be involving anyone else, sweetheart, or I swear to God." Victor crouched down. His movements were slow, deliberate. He picked up the cheap plastic phone. It looked absurdly small in his large, calloused hand. He didn't say anything at first. He just brought the phone up to his face. "Sadie," Mick barked. "Answer me, you dumb bitch." Sadie squeezed her eyes shut, pressing her hands over her ears. "O'Shea," Victor said. His voice wasn't loud. It wasn't a shout. It was a low, resonant baritone that vibrated with lethal authority. It was the voice of a man who gave orders to kill between sips of coffee. The line went dead silent. "Who is this?" Mick asked, the bravado slipping just a fraction. "You're breathing my air, Mick," Victor said softly. He stood up, turning his gaze toward the dark window at the end of the hall. "You're operating in my city, and you're bothering my staff. In my house." A long, agonizing pause stretched over the line. Mr. Costello." Mick's voice dropped an octave. The sneering Irish lilt vanished, replaced by the unmistakable tremor of sheer terror. "Victor, I didn't know." "You have a man at St. Jude's?" Victor stated calmly, ignoring the stammering apology. "Declan." "Victor, it's just business. The girl owes me." "Listen very closely to me, Mick, because I will not repeat myself." Victor interrupted. His voice dropped to a whisper that carried more weight than a scream. "You are going to call Declan. You are going to tell him to walk out of that hospital, get in his car, and drive out of this state. If he is still in the city limits by sunrise, I will have him skinned." "Done." Mick practically choked on the word. "He's gone. Consider it done, Mr. Costello." "Good," Victor said. "Now, as for the debt, the girl doesn't owe you anything. The debt is cancelled. The interest is cancelled. In fact, you owe me a tax for the disrespect of making a phone call to my private residence at 2 a.m. "Tax," Mick squeaked. 50 grand, delivered to my warehouse on the docks by noon tomorrow. If it's short, or if you're late, I'm going to send Rocco to your little club, and he's going to burn it to the ground with you inside it. Do we understand each other?" "Yes, sir. Absolutely, Mr. Costello. I swear the girl is free and clear. I won't ever contact her again. If you even look in her direction, I will pull your teeth out with a pair of pliers," Victor said smoothly. He ended the call without waiting for a reply. The silence rushed back into the hallway, thick and suffocating. Victor stood there for a moment, staring at the phone. He pressed a button, turning it off, cutting the power completely. Then he turned his head and looked at Sadie. She was still pressed against the wall, trembling like a leaf in a hurricane. Her eyes were wide, terrified, staring at him as if he were the devil himself. And maybe he was. Victor slowly engaged the safety on his gun and slipped it into the back of his waistband. He tossed the burner phone onto the cart with a clatter. "Get up," he said. It wasn't a request. Sadie scrambled to her feet, her legs weak and shaking. She gripped the edge of the cleaning cart to keep from falling over. She kept her head down, staring at the toes of his expensive leather shoes. "Look at me," Victor commanded. Sadie forced her chin up. She met his eyes. They were dark, cold, and entirely unreadable. She expected anger. She expected to be fired. "Your brother," Victor said flatly. "What's wrong with him?" "The leukemia," Sadie stammered, her voice cracking. He's at St. Jude's." Victor studied her face. He saw the dark circles under her eyes, the hollow cheekbones, the absolute exhaustion radiating off her small frame. He glanced down at her hands, red cracked, bleeding at the cuticles. He felt a strange, uncomfortable tightening in his chest. He ignored it. "Go to the kitchen," Victor ordered. "Tell the night chef to make you something to eat. You look like a stiff breeze would snap you in half." Sadie blinked, entirely thrown off balance. I have to finish the brass." "The brass is fine," Victor snapped, his patience fraying. "Go eat, then go to your room. You're off the clock." "But Mr. Costello, the money." "I handled the money," Victor said, his voice hardening. "O'Shea is done. If he or anyone else contacts you again, you tell me. Immediately. Understand?" Sadie stared at him, tears welling in her eyes all over again. The crushing, suffocating weight that had been sitting on her chest for 6 months vanished in a matter of seconds. He had saved Sam. He had saved her. "Thank you," she whispered, a sob breaking in her throat. "Thank you so much. I don't know how to repay you. I'll work double shifts. You'll do your job," Victor interrupted coldly, turning his back on her. He didn't want her gratitude. It felt wrong. It felt heavy. "Keep the floors clean. Keep your head down. And for God's sake, stop crying outside my office." He walked back into his study, the heavy oak door clicking shut behind him, leaving Sadie standing alone in the quiet hallway. She took a shaky breath, the smell of lemon and ammonia, suddenly the sweetest thing in the world. She wiped her face, staring at the closed door. Victor Costello was a monster. Everyone knew that. But as Sadie walked toward the kitchen, her heart beating a steady, safe rhythm for the first time in months, she realized something else. Sometimes you need a monster to keep the wolves at bay. The smell of St. Jude's was permanently etched into Sadie's olfactory memory. It was a sharp, clinical blend of rubbing alcohol floor wax and the metallic tang of fear. Usually walking through the sliding glass doors felt like stepping into a vacuum chamber. Today it felt like walking into a cathedral. She had taken the early bus, running on 0 sleep and a cup of stale break-room coffee. Her chest was a tight drum. Victor Costello had said O'Shea was handled. He had said the debt was gone. But people like Sadie didn't get miracles. They got eviction notices and final warnings. She bypassed the main desk, keeping her head down, her battered sneakers squeaking on the linoleum. She navigated the maze of corridors to the oncology wing, her heart hammering against her ribs. 3rd floor, room 312. She turned the corner. The door was open. Sadie stopped dead. The bed was empty. Stripped to the mattress. The paper cup of coffee slipped from her cracked fingers, splashing brown liquid across the polished floor. Her vision blurred. The buzzing in her ears drowned out the intercom announcements. Declan, O'Shea's man. He had been here. He had. "Can I help you, miss?" Sadie whipped around. A nurse in blue scrubs was watching her eyebrows raised at the spilled coffee. "My brother Sadie," choked out, grabbing the doorframe to keep her knees from buckling. Samuel Hayes. He was in 312. "Where is he?" The nurse's expression softened instantly. "Oh, honey. Breathe. He's fine. He was moved this morning." Sadie blinked the fluorescent lights burning her retinas. "Moved where the ICU. No, up to the 5th floor. The private suites." The nurse pointed toward the elevators. "Room 505. Sadie didn't wait. She abandoned